Off the roads and onto the trains. Government plans for a railway version of the M25.
Farm at the centre of an E. coli scare reopens, but parents ask, are such visits safe for our children?
Until there is the guarantee, yes, I don't think children should be touching animals.
And why it's no fun to be home alone if you're a man about the house.
You are a bit of an outsider, I suppose, in the same way when women go into once male-only professions.
Good evening. There was a stern message today to South East motorists who won't stop driving to work. The Transport Secretary, John Prescott, said, "We can't go on the way we are."
It came as he launched a government paper packed with ideas on how to ease congestion and improve public transport. The consultation document contains dozens of proposals to get the region moving again.
Among them, an orbital rail network, a sort of rail equivalent of the M25 around London, to be created by joining up existing lines.
There's a possibility drivers could be charged for entering London.
And it's also been suggested car parking spaces in the capital could be axed. Well, our transport correspondent Tom Simons joins us from the A1 at Archway in North London. Tom.
Well, it's the holiday season, and as you can see, the A1 is about as quiet as it ever gets. The government would like it to be like this all the time. And today it posed the question, how do we achieve that? London is served by 11 rail networks and 11 tube lines, but still people drive, because often public transport isn't convenient. Most rail lines run in and out of central London. Today, Transport Minister John Prescott put his weight behind a plan to give the city a railway that circles the central area. In the past, there have been several failed schemes to improve London's rail network. Plans for Crossrail, a line joining East and West London, were effectively shelved by the Conservatives because of cost. The proposed Chelsea to Hackney line has never been a serious contender for government money. But the government is confident an M25-style orbital railway could be built at a fraction of the cost. London already has the rail lines which form most of the circle. Joining them to the East London Underground line would complete the link, and trains could run to many parts of the city without entering central London.
That is the type of investment which will enhance an integrated transport system in this country. Will make it easier for people to change from one transport mode to the other.
There are bottlenecks in the railway infrastructure in the same way as there are on the road infrastructure, and that's why we need more money, more investment. And today's paper from the government says nothing about where the money is going to come from, or indeed if there is going to be any more money.
Labour may try and make drivers pay as part of its plans to entice them out of their cars. Some suggest drivers could be made to buy a special tax disc, but some motoring organisations are opposed to the idea.
The problem with road pricing is that it may not reduce congestion because company car drivers and freight operators will continue to drive into city centres and then pass the costs on to their customers.
To tackle transport problems, the government wants to know what people think of its ideas. People in the South East aren't short of opinions.
The increased amount of public transport, then, well, hopefully less people would use their own cars, especially in the city because you can't find anywhere to park.
The only thing I could suggest is obviously more parking zones, of free parking zones, because there's nowhere to park.
Well, I think they should have like 4 people in a car, if possible, you know, like school children, you can have like 2 women and their, you know, 3 or 4 kids.
The stakes are high. If nothing's done, it's estimated there'll be another 10 million cars on the roads in the next 10 years. Well, with me is Stephen O'Brien from the business consortium London First, which has many members in the city behind us, and many of them complain about congestion. Did you like what you read today in the government's document?
We thought the government's document's a really good start to a major, serious debate. It says there are clear choices that have to be made. We agree with that.
What about the commitment for funding? There wasn't a lot of that, was there?
It was very short on the funding options. We believe that business feels that transport is such a serious issue that it itself would actually contribute to some of the solutions if it felt that the money was going directly into transport projects and they could actually see the improvement happening.
The government's big idea is that by integrating bits of the network at relatively little cost, it can make things a lot better. Do you believe them?
I believe it could certainly improve things. If you take buses, for example, small amount of money would actually transform the bus system in London, and that's what we need.
Well, as you can see, the roads are very clear tonight, and if you are planning to brave Mr. Prescott's wrath and drive home, you're going to have an easy journey. With that, it's back to Gargi in the studio.
Tom,
thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Well, moving on now. The farm at the centre of an E. coli outbreak in Hertfordshire is to open again this weekend.
Bowman's farm at London Coney was closed in June when 3 children became ill after a visit. One of them is still in hospital with severe brain damage. The farm says it's taken every possible step to prevent another outbreak, but the child's parents say no farm should let children touch animals unless they can guarantee they're free of E. coli. Yvonne Hall reports.
Most children love farm visits, and for those from city areas, it can be their only chance to see and touch animals. But the outbreak of E. coli at Bowman's Open Farm means many adults supervising youngsters, like these visiting a farm in Essex today, are now taking extra care with hygiene.
I'm quite aware of it, and they must keep their hands clean after touching any animal.
Children always put their fingers in the mouth, especially young children. So you do ensure that they wash their hands, and obviously before eating.
Bowman's farm voluntarily closed in June after 3 children suffered severe sickness and diarrhoea caused by E. coli, believed to have been caught from touching 4 goats, which have now been taken away for tests. After extensive examinations of the remaining animals and stringent new hygiene measures, the farm is set to reopen on Saturday, confident it's done everything possible to minimise the risks.
Read the literature, understand what the risk is, and for goodness sake, follow the safety tips. Wash your hands, watch the children, but come and enjoy it. It is still an educational visit, it's fun, and there is, if the hygiene measures are followed, if the safety points are followed, it represents no greater risk than a lot of other related leisure activities.
But it is a risk some parents say is too great to take. 4-year-old Tom Dowling, seen here on a recent holiday, was one of those who became ill after visiting Bowman's. He's still in hospital with severe brain damage, unable to do anything apart from slight eye movements. His family are considering legal action against Bowman's and say no child should be allowed to touch farm animals because farms can't guarantee they haven't got E. coli.
I think you just have to guarantee that there is no infection there if they are going to carry on touching. But until there is the guarantee, yes, I don't think children should be touching animals at farms because it is such a great risk.
The E. coli outbreak and the improvements to hygiene here at Bowman's farm are likely to affect every other open farm in the country. Health and safety officials are now planning to meet with all farm managers to ensure they too reinforce the hygiene message without spoiling children's fun and education. Yvonne Hall, Newsroom South East, Bowman's Farm, London Coney.
And still to come in tonight's programme, from derelict to des res, why brownfield sites could be the solution to London's housing shortage.
And ringing in the new millennium, the first bells to be cast for the big celebration.
But first, staff at a central London bank were taken to hospital today when toxic fumes spilled out of a cash machine. The area around the Halifax Bank in Victoria Street, Westminster, was cordoned off as fire officers tried to identify the chemical. It thought a small electrical fault was to blame. 12 people were taken to hospital.
A woman's been taken to hospital with head injuries after being hit by a police car answering an emergency call in Croydon. It happened this afternoon when the 20-year-old pedestrian tried to cross Catherine Street. Scotland Yard says the car was using a flashing light and siren. The woman was taken by air ambulance to the Royal London Hospital. Her condition isn't known.
The cousin of murdered South London schoolgirl Kirsty Tidman killed himself after being questioned by police, an inquest heard today. Detectives had arrested Paul Pearson 4 days after Kirsty's disappearance, but had released him on bail. They later said that tests proved he was the killer. Paul Curran has this report.
Kirsty disappeared from outside her Charlton home on May the 4th this year. An intensive search was launched and her parents appealed for anyone with information to get in contact. But 9 days later, her dismembered body was found floating in the Thames at Wapping. Her head has never been recovered. As part of the investigation, police had arrested the last person to be seen with Kirsty, her 30-year-old cousin, Paul Pearson. After questioning, he was released on bail, but his body was found the next day at his home in Abbey Wood. Police later revealed that tests on his hire car showed he had murdered Kirsty. Today's inquest heard that Paul Pearson had cut his own throat after taking a large quantity of painkillers. His half-sister described how he was very depressed after being questioned by police. A ripped-up suicide note was found in his bedroom. The coroner made no link between his death and the murder of Kirsty Tidman, but she said she was sure he'd taken his own life. Paul Curran, Newsroom South East at Southwark Coroner's Court.
3 girls and an 18-year-old man have appeared in court in connection with the assault of a pensioner in West London. 83-year-old Rosie Howe suffered a 5-hour ordeal in her flat in Brentford last weekend. One of the girls was remanded into care. The other 2 girls and the man were bailed to return to court at a later date.
One of the region's jails has been heavily criticised by the Chief Inspector of Prisons. Sir David Ramsbottom says Swaleside Prison on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent suffers from a lack of direction from above and its activities are flawed in their delivery. However, the report praised the prison's drug rehabilitation centre.
Schools across the southeast have been poring over today's GCSE results, and none more so than the 7 secondaries shamed by the government for persistently failing their pupils. Their exam scores could make the difference between survival and closure. But as our education correspondent Anthony Dorr reports, one school is excelling in at least one subject.
It could belong in a gallery. In fact, it's coursework for GCSE art at Dulwich High School for boys. In most subjects, results are among the lowest in the southeast. But today, 4 out of 5 boys learnt they'd received good grades in art, with 3 scoring the top mark.
We tend to rely on the diversity of cultures that we have here and build on that, use it as a positive means of getting the kids interested in the subject, taking things from their own backgrounds.
The thing with art is just you can create anything you want, and the only limit is your imagination.
Dulwich is one of 12 schools in the southeast given until next month to show improvement or face takeover or even closure. Although Dulwich's overall results have risen this year, it's not just art that will be taken into account. Anthony Dorr, Newsroom South East in South London.
Well, as the southeast population grows, so too does the demand for housing. But the region's hardly famed for its wide open spaces.
Much of the land surrounding the capital is protected by Greenbelt. But where will the houses be built? Well, there is a new option. It's the ecologically friendly trend to build on derelict sites in the city. For the second of his reports on the environment, Sumit Bose went to the heart of the city.
Ten years ago, this area of Butler's Wharf was much like this, decrepit warehouses that had been left derelict for years. It was part of London that was right in the heart of London, and yet it was dead. But thanks to investment, this area is alive again once more. There are businesses here, people have moved into the warehouses. It's alive, a true example how urban regeneration has helped the environment. Butler's Wharf is a prime example of a brownfield development, turning a once disused office or factory site into homes and new businesses. It's now a thriving community with restaurants and shops and attracts not only business investment, but more importantly, people moving back into the centre of London. 10 years ago, it was very different. Abandoned for years, those who decided to move into the area were considered to be taking a huge risk. Rachel Belkind was among the first, but today she has no regrets about leaving the suburbs.
Friends thought we were raving lunatics to move south of the river, but now we actually sometimes need to pay them to leave after we've had a lunch or a dinner. It's very pretty now, very beautiful now during the day, but it's even more beautiful at night. And it doesn't matter how horrendous your day has been, if you come and sit out over here or at one of the restaurants, everything just goes away, and it's just marvelous to be living here.
When the new settlers moved in, they brought with them money to help regenerate a deprived area. This chef school specialises in training people from all walks of life, including those who were once homeless. It's a prime example of how business investment has helped to boost the local economy.
what we've been able to do here is bring jobs to the area. So even if you can't afford some of the expensive flats and houses around here, you can at least work here. And what that's meant for people in the north of the borough is the opportunity to work, and you can't knock that.
But Butler's Wharf isn't unique. All over London, more and more disused buildings are being turned into homes.
The bathroom will be here, the kitchen will be this side, and you will have a bedroom and a lounge here. Coming out onto the main
This office block just opposite Waterloo Station is being stripped and turned into flats. The company responsible believes building on brownfield sites makes not just economic but environmental sense as well.
We think that we are improving the environment, and it will take away the empty, derelict buildings in the area, and the whole area is lifted.
But what's caused such a shift in the desire to improve the environment in our city centres?
Up to the late 1980s, people were thinking of environment as being about fluffy bunnies and trees and fields. And in particular, if I join organisations that do most important work in those areas, that's all it is. But as the business and environment revolution's proved in the last 10 years, it's much more than that. It's about the efficiency of businesses, it's about the efficiency of economies, and of course, it's about whether people are happy.
Brownfield development may be good in general, but in the long term, moving back into city centres can only really improve the environment if we leave one thing behind: our cars.
And tomorrow we'll be taking a look at how the southeast rivers are being cleaned up in our final report on our environmental series, Gargi.
The government says it's to review procedures at detention centres after yesterday's riot at Campsfield House in Oxfordshire. Today, an asylum seeker who'd been held at the centre blamed the regime run by Group 4 security and the policy of moving detainees around the country. Our reporter Joanne Coburn went to Campsfield to investigate.
Life seems to be getting back to normal here at Campsfield House Detention Centre, but it was a very different story here yesterday as detainees staged a demonstration at the gates behind me and went on the rampage through the centre. This is all that's left of the library at Campsfield House. It was destroyed along with furniture and other facilities used by the 200 detainees that live here.
I would say to you that we're probably standing in the saddest part of the building today. This was, one of my colleagues said to me yesterday, this was their haven of peace, and it was very well used. It had books from almost every country in the world. It's a real sadness that this has happened.
The trouble started early yesterday morning. Riot police were brought in to bring the situation under control. It's claimed that the disturbance was sparked by the Immigration Service's decision to move 3 people out of Campsfield and into another detention centre. This man, a former detainee who wishes to remain anonymous, says Campsfield House is like a prison.
The life is at Campsfield is very, very, very horrible. For me, it's very horrible in Campsfield. It's every day, the same thing for detainees. Group 4, no respect to detainees. Detainees is not a criminal. Is a refugee politic. Is not criminal. I repeat that. Is not prison. Is a refugee politic.
All visits to Campsfield House have been stopped temporarily while the police carry out an investigation into what happened. It's estimated that £100,000 worth of damage has been done to the centre, but not everything has been destroyed, and it's expected that some people will be moved back to their rooms later this evening. With me outside Campsfield House is the Home Office Minister, Mike O'Brien. Mr O'Brien, you're responsible for immigration. What's your response to what happened here yesterday?
Well, I wanted to come and see the Campsfield site and the damage that's been done. This is not a prison, it's a secure hostel, and the facilities here were quite good, and there was a lot of freedom of association. And unfortunately, some of the detainees have decided to damage the building quite severely.
But there are claims that the reason for this disturbance is because the Immigration Service keeps moving detainees at random around the country.
The Immigration Service detains very few asylum seekers. At any one time, about 1% of asylum seekers who could be detained under the immigration and asylum rules.
But do you move them around the country at random?
From time to time, we have to move people from one centre to another, and we also have to detain people in order to effect their removal. Now, in Parliament about 2 months ago, I announced a review of our whole detention policy, and that's now ongoing. However, what I wanted to do was come here and see this damage. it surely is the case that detainees who have fairly relaxed facilities should not abuse it in this way.
But what are you going to do to make sure that nothing like this happens again in the future?
Wherever you've got a centre, you always get, particularly a centre which undergoes a relaxed regime, because these people are unconvicted. You're going to have a potential problem, and what you have to do is ensure that the relationships are the best possible. Now, we do need to detain people from time to time, and it is necessary that we do so in reasonable circumstances. I think you will see that the accommodation in here is quite reasonable for a secure hostel, and it is very regrettable indeed that these people have chosen to destroy it.
Mike O'Brien, Home Office Minister, thank you very much for joining me. Joanne Coburn, Newsroom South East, outside Campsfield House in Oxfordshire.
Well, now it seems more men than ever are choosing to stay at home to look after the children while their wives go out to work.
But it isn't always plain sailing. Role reversal can lead to jealousy, and men often feel isolated because they're not accepted into social groups as readily as their other halves. Amanda Harper reports.
Les Jones from Croydon in South London is a house husband. He cooks and cleans and cares for his twin sons Declan and Hayden while his wife goes out to work. Reversing roles seemed an obvious choice after he lost his job, but he soon found that equality in the home wasn't always mirrored outside.
A health visitor came round to see us and mentioned to my wife that each week they had a meeting of mums with newborn babies, and perhaps my wife would like to go along. My wife explained, well, thanks very much, but she was going to be going back to work fairly shortly. And I said, well, perhaps I could come along. There was a slight pause, and then it was explained, well, no, it is only for mums.
It's estimated that more than 500,000 men now stay at home while their wives go out to work. But role reversal isn't without its pitfalls. While young mums find it easier to slip into social groups, dads are often excluded and left isolated. Breadwinners like Jan Henderson also missed her daughter's early years.
I'm aware that I've missed out a great deal, and there's a certain amount of jealousy and resentment there. But we've managed to sort those problems out, and it's okay now. But it's not been a walk in the park.
Jan's husband Seth has experienced the good and the bad of being a house husband. Now he's set up a support group called House Husband Link with a newsletter appropriately titled Him Indoors.
You are a bit of an outsider, I suppose, in the same way when women go into once male-only professions, they felt like they were outsiders as well. When there's more house husbands around, attitudes will change, but it will be slow. Especially in the older generation, they tend to think that men shouldn't be looking after kids.
It seems many men, though, would relish the prospect of staying at home with the kids.
Anything for an easy life.
You think looking after children is easy?
I wouldn't mind, especially in this heat. Yeah.
The husband doesn't have a job and the woman has a job. It's a very good thing.
Seth hopes his group will be able to offer advice and support to dads. He says house husbands should be as socially acceptable as housewives. Amanda Harper, Newsroom South East, South London.
Now, in this hot and humid weather, spare a thought for the workers at Whitechapel Foundry in East London. They've been busy casting the first of up to 100 new bells to ring in the next century. James Cameron.
Burn awards, things, and just the right herbs and spices. So how could she be sure her recipe is as appetizing